My next collection of stories that I'm going to read, they come from a book called After Hours. It's a collection of erotic stories written by Black men from a perspective that I understand. All of these stories were edited by Robert Fleming. Let me tell you a story. The name of the story is called Cultural Relativity, written by Charles Johnson. Not long ago, a college student named Felicia Brooks felt she was the most fortunate young woman in all of Seattle, and possibly the entire world, except for one small problem. She was deeply in love with her boyfriend, an African student who was the only son of his country's president. His name was Fornutada Mafa. In the spring of 2001, they both were graduating seniors at the University of Washington. They had been dating all year long. He was more than she could ever have hoped for. And Felicia knew all her friends thought Fornutada was catnip. In fact, she was afraid sometimes that they might steal him from her. Most of them had given up on Black men entirely, or at least had given up on American Black men. Their mantra, which Felicia had heard 1,000 times and often chanted herself, was that all the good Black men were taken and the rest were in prison, on drugs, or unemployed, or dating white women, or didn't like girls at all. What was a sister to do? During high school and college, Felicia and her friends despaired of ever finding Mr. Right. But then, miraculously, she met Fornutada fall quarter at the Langston Hughes Cultural Center. He looked like a young Kwame Nkrumah. He dressed as elegantly as Michael Jordan, was gorgeous the few times she saw him in his agbada, African robe. And he fit the George Bernard Shaw's definition of a gentle being, a man who always tries to put a little more than he takes out. Furthermore, he was rich. He could play the kora, an African stringed instrument, so beautifully, you'd cry. Yet for all that, he still had a schoolboyish shyness and was frequently confused by the way Americans did things, especially by pulp culture, which was so sexually frank compared to his own country, which made Fornutada squirm. All of this Felicia thought was charming as well as exciting because it meant that he was her very own Galilea and she was his Pygmalion, his guide and interpreter on those shores. He dazzled her every day when he described the ancient culture of his father's wisdom in West Africa. There, in the remote world, his people were introducing the most sophisticated technology. And that was why Fornutada had studied computer engineering. But he said his people worked hard to avoid damaging aspects of westernization. They were determined to revolutionize their science, but also to preserve the 1,000-year-old traditions, their religion, and their folk ways, even when the reason for some of the unique practices had been forgotten. One night in June, after the final exams were over, Felicia played for him the movie Coming to America on the VCR in her studio apartment on Capitol Hill, hoping he would enjoy it, which he did. No sooner than it was over, Fornutada slid close to her on the sofa and said, "I am so like Eddie Murphy in this funny movie. I came to America 4 years ago, not just for an education, but really to find a beautiful American woman to share my life. To be my queen, Felicia. That woman is you, if you will have me. Because if I can't have you, then I don't want anyone. I just won't marry, ever." Naturally, Felicia said yes. "And," he added, "you promise not to change your mind? No matter what happened?" She did. From the pocket of his suit coat, Fornutada produced a ring with a flawless 4-carat diamond shape like the Star of South Africa. For precious stones were plentiful in his country, a nation rich in natural resources. Felicia threw her arms around him. Then, without thinking, acting on what she believed was instinct, she brought her lips close to his, but before she could kiss Fornutada, he wiggled away. "What?" said Felicia. "What's wrong?" Fornutada gave her a shy, sideways look. His voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. We don't do that." "What?" she said. You don't kiss? She looked straight at him. He looked down. You know I can't. Why not? Please, don't start this again. Now, Fornutada seemed nervous. He began rolling the end of his tie between his fingers. I'm not sure why, we just don't. The reason is lost in antiquity. Felicia, it's not that unusual. Polynesians rub noses, you know. Samoans sniff each other. And traditional Japanese and Chinese cultures did not include this strange practice called kissing. I suspect they felt it was too intimate a thing for people to do. All I know is that my father warned me never to do this thing when I came to America. We've discussed this before, don't you remember? Felicia did remember, but not happily. This was the one thing about Fornutada that baffled and bothered her deeply. She understood that his culture was very traditional. For example, Fornutada's people insisted that sex should be postponed until a couple's wedding night. All during the past year, they'd done almost everything else that lovers did. They held hands, hugged, and snuggled, but there were no kisses, not even an air kiss, or a goodnight kiss when he dropped Felicia off at her apartment and returned to his dormitory. The last thing she wanted was to be culturally insensitive, or to offend Fornutada, or to have him break off their nearly perfect relationship. So on those past occasions, Felicia never insisted that he kiss her, nor did she insist on the night he summoned up the courage to propose. After taking a deep breath, she said sadly, "Can we rub noses then?" "Of course," said Fornutada. "I think that's okay." It is well known when two people fall in love, their brains produce amphetamine-like substances which are responsible for what we call lover's high. What she felt, in fact, was half ecstasy that she was to wed the son of an African statesman, and half bewilderment because rubbing noses, in her view, was no substitute for a big wet one. She was a highly intelligent woman, a woman about to graduate with her degree in anthropology. She wondered if she was being culturally inflexible. But Felicia knew all her life she had been fascinated by and respectful of the differences in cultures, how each was self-contained and a complete system that must be understood from within. She knew her Levi Strauss and the work of dozens of structural anthropologists. You did not have to tell her that in some Muslim countries, it was insulting to cross your legs when sitting if the soles of your shoes were displayed to your host, or that in Theravada Buddhist countries like Thailand, patting a cute youngster on the top of his head was a no-no because that part of the body was looked upon as sacred. So yes, she had always taken great pains to carefully listen when Fortunata spoke of his country's history and mysterious customs. But she wanted a kiss. Was that asking for too much? She knew, in her heart, she knew that kissing was special. And to prove it to herself, she sat down at her computer, went to the internet, and spent the night looking at everything she could find on the subject. Just as she expected, kissing was an expression of love and affection was old. Very old. It dated back to the 5th century. And as a custom, it was even older than that. The early Christians borrowed kissing from the Romans. Clearly, it was the most human of practices. Everyone knew animals didn't kiss. They licked. The reason for having lips in the first place, Felicia decided just before daybreak, was so people could use their God-given soup coolers as the most romantic, the most erotic, and the most natural way to show they love someone. During the last year, Felicia had introduced Fortunata to all kinds of things outside of his culture. Karaoke, the music of Jimi Hendrix, and Kurt Cobain. The importance of Ichiro bobbleheads, and why everyone needed a good-looking tattoo. And he had enjoyed all of it, and thanked her for enlightening him as a good Galileo would. When she finally drifted off to sleep around 10 a.m., Felicia wondered if Fortunata had lied. That maybe people in his culture did kiss, but for some reason he simply didn't want to kiss her. But no. She had never caught him in a lie before. It was more likely that he never kissed anyone. So she was certain that if Fortunata could just experience the electric thrill of kissing once, And with the right woman, meaning herself, then a wonderful new cultural doorway would open up for him. If she truly loved him, Felicia knew she owed him that. As luck would have it, Fortunata dropped by unexpectedly that evening as she was fixing dinner. He was almost bursting with excitement. "Felicia," he said, "I just spoke with my father. I told him about our engagement. We have his blessing. In my country, the wedding ceremony lasts for a week. Since my father is president, the whole country will celebrate." He paused to catch his breath. "Aren't you happy?" To show her happiness, Felicia pressed her body against him. Before he could move, she placed her hands on both sides of his head, pulled him closer, puckered up, and bestowed upon a startled Fortunata the most soulful, moist, and meaningful lip lock she had ever delivered in her life. She felt her heart beating faster, the temperature of her skin beneath her clothes heating up. Smiling, Felicia took a step back. The expression on Fortunata's face was unreadable. He started to speak, but stopped. And then suddenly, he was gone. Where Fortunata had stood, there was a full-grown, giant West African frog. It was a foot long and weighed as much as a fox terrier. "I warned you," he said. Felicia felt ill. She thought, "I can't handle this." But what she said was, "I don't suppose we can break off the engagement, can we?" "Don't be silly," said the frog. Thank you for listening. Comment below on what you want me to read next.